So I wanted to talk about the subject of dart frogs and water. So you may or may not know within the dart frog hobby, there's like a really widespread belief that dart frogs can't swim, that they are very poor swimmers, that they can drown easily, and so in context, this usually means that it's people trying to do paludariums. They're discouraged from keeping dart frogs in setups with water because of the fact that it's said that they're such bad swimmers that they could drown, that having them in a setup with a body of water is dangerous for the frogs. And this is like false. It's like completely false, and it's objectively false. It's not just that I feel that keeping them in paludariums is safe, or I think this or that. It's a matter of like objective fact that the key points that a lot of people argue when it comes to this subject, they are incorrect, like verifiably false. And we'll talk about those right now. The first point is that dart frogs can't swim. People say, oh, dart frogs can't swim, they're poor swimmers, and so having them in a body or near a body of water, if they fall into that water, it's dangerous because they're such bad swimmers that they could drown in that body of water. And that's like completely not true. Dart frogs are great swimmers. They swim just fine. All frogs swim just fine, to my knowledge. I don't know of any frog that if you put it into a body of water, it would just like thrash around and drown immediately. There are many organisms that are bad swimmers, like tortoises. If you drop a tortoise in some water, they're not good swimmers. It's going to sink to the bottom of the body of water, and then it's going to drown. That won't happen with dart frogs. They will swim around until they find an exit or whatever, and then climb out of the water. And if they can't swim around, or if they can't find an exit, they'll bob around in the water for like an extended period of time. They don't just sink to the bottom. And so that's the first point. Dart frogs can totally swim. So when people say dart frogs can't swim, they are incorrect. And when people say dart frogs are not strong swimmers, they are also incorrect. Dart frogs are adept swimmers, are great at swimming, can dive under the water, can swim along the surface of the water. They're great at swimming. And the second point is people say that dart frogs they can drown easily, that since they're terrestrial frogs, that they have a high risk of drowning if they fall into a body of water. Now, this is also objectively false. All frogs are amphibians, right? So they are naturally bound to water at some stage in their life. And even the ones that have evolved to be more terrestrial, that have evolved to stray further from water in their, adult phase, they are still amphibians and still retain a lot of these characteristics that make them adapted for being submerged underneath the water. And the most relevant characteristic is their heart and circulatory system and how they can breathe. So frogs I think all amphibians have a 3-chambered heart and a system of capillaries in their skin that allow them to essentially breathe through their skin, to perform gas exchange, via their skin, cutaneous gas exchange. And their heart, they have the ability to route blood away from their lungs and to this system of capillaries when using their lungs is not ideal, such as when they're submerged, they can essentially, primarily breathe through their skin. And as long as the oxygen content in the water is high enough, they can remain submerged. Now, this is hard to find species-specific data, but I've read generalizations in scientific journals that say it's assumed that most frog species can stay submerged indefinitely. And I'm kind of loath to use that word because, that's like a really large generalization. But it's safe to say that, on average, a frog could stay submerged underwater for multiple hours and be just fine, completely submerged underneath the surface of the water, as long as the oxygen content is high enough. And I've mentioned oxygen content several times now because there are reports of drowned frogs in people's setups. And I think I've kind of discovered, or like, I have a hypothesis as to the reason behind these deaths. And so something that's brought up that is in fact accurate is that frogs wrestle. Frogs, like all species of frogs for the most part, even the group tolerant ones, display aggressive behavior towards each other from time to time, whether it's usually like territorial, or it could be, like dominance, hierarchy type stuff. But when they're wrestling, the frog that's winning essentially will oftentimes pin down the frog that's losing, and the pinned frog will be pinned for sometimes like an extended period of time. It'll kind of like hold it there. And so I have to digress a little bit here, but so these people that say that frogs can't swim, they also recommend, it's commonly said that if you have to have a paludarium, that it should be very shallow, that the water feature in your setup should be really shallow. That way the frog can't actually like, it can touch the ground at all times. It's just like, like wading around in the water. And they believe that this is safer because they think the frog can't swim, and so therefore this shallow water feature, how could a frog ever drown in a shallow water feature? Well, these small, shallow water features usually don't have a lot of, like, a large volume of water in them, and therefore they don't have a large capacity to, they can't hold a lot of dissolved oxygen, especially relative to the size of the frog. And so if two frogs are wrestling and one has pinned another one down underneath the surface of the water, it can pretty rapidly deplete the oxygen in that water, and then it will in fact suffocate and drown. And what's funny is this, this shallow water feature that's touted as being safe, that kind of presents one of the only situations in which an amphibian could drown relatively rapidly, is if you held a struggling amphibian underneath in a small little tiny puddle of water until it used up all that oxygen, and then it would drown. Something that can usually stay submerged indefinitely could drown relatively quickly if it used up all the oxygen. So not only are the people that are kind of naysaying frogs and water features, not only are they wrong, but the advice that they're giving is dangerous. What they're advising as a safe alternative is a death trap, is a very dangerous thing for frogs. A small, shallow dish of water in a tank where these frogs are wrestling and pinning each other down, that is a death trap. And so it's just kind of funny that like this ignorance has led to such bad advice, to such dangerous advice. And it's kind of, all a result of hearsay. It's based on absolutely nothing. All these people that say, oh, dart frogs can't swim, and they feel so strongly about this and will rip other people apart online, they have no first-hand experience, right? Like none at all. Nothing regarding dart frogs in water. They've never kept dart frogs in a paludarium. They've never ran any tests. They just read somewhere that dart frogs can't swim. And they didn't read it in a scientific journal. They didn't read it in any sort of reputable source. They just read it from some other guy on Facebook. Some other dude was like, oh yeah, dart frogs can't swim. They read that comment and now they're just repeating it. And now they're just, oh yeah, dart frogs can't swim. You're a bad keeper because you have a paludarium and dart frogs can't swim. I have no idea for sure or not, but I'm just gonna say that. So it's kind of like ridiculous that all of this whole like urban myth is built on absolutely nothing at all. It's built on ignorance and hearsay, and I don't know, it just seems kind of laughable. And so that's what I have to say about that. When people say that dart frogs can't swim or that water poses a drowning risk to them, they are wrong. They are objectively wrong. It's not a matter of opinion. It's a matter of fact that they are wrong. So you can show this video to them and tell them to go, suck it.